analysing rowing. So, without much more ado, is that coming across okay? My screen? You give me the screen to share?
Yep.
Okay, no problem.
Hmm.
Share. Content only.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Hi, Dan.
Hello, Bill.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Don't know about anybody else.
I'm just trying to. Has that happened?
Something's happening, John. Yeah, okay.
Oh, right.
We've got it as an overlay at the moment, John. Did you want to split the screen or? Okay, so we've got an overlay of about 2/3 of the screen is now showing a complete slide.
Okay. Myths of rowing.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So what I'm going to take is a gentle introduction, followed by a subject I've invented, which I call Sweet Zone. Then looking at analysing the recovery. Then how do we increase the strokes per minute? People talk a lot about feet out, and what I'm going to do is some analysis of slope angle on the erg and the possibility of having feet out. Look at the deceleration approaching the catch. A lot of people talk a lot of rubbish about it. Then I'll take what I've been talking about and analyze a particular graph of someone's performance and show you how I would use what we've been talking about. So,
Sorry, John, to butt in. Will you be sending out your presentation afterwards?
yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
So here we had this wonderful curve. And we're talking 1980. And what upset me was, where the hell did this come from? See? How did the boat increase in velocity on the recovery? Some must be going on there. Because I knew a wee fella called Newton, and he said to me, unless you apply a force, nothing happens. So I didn't like that. Then I looked at this end. Here's the catch. And why the hell are we losing speed on the catch? Why is it taking some time before we start accelerating in the boat? And then, what was this? Flat. And I'll come to each of these in turn. If we look at the fellow who wrote the paper, Bernfield, he says, contrary to what might be expected, the boat continues to accelerate during the recovery. He then says, as the seats move towards the stern, and this is where he got it wrong. He still the concept like an erg, where you drive up the slide and then you go back down the slide again to take the catch. And this is where he got it wrong. Now, when we look at this flat bit here, I was actually running a level 2 course in Glasgow, and I explained to people I didn't understand what was happening here. And the lad said to me, "Oh, I know why. In 1972, in Harvard, they'd stop and shop. When they came to backstops, they sat there.
Well, we could probably use a tester on that, to be honest.
So what happened is the
But-
boat did not
Think about it.
accelerate. The
So-
boat didn't do anything.
Okay, bye-bye.
It's only when they started the recovery that they got the velocity going. And people would say to me, oh, let the boat run under you. Probably you've heard the phrase before. And how does a boat suddenly take off and shoot under me? How does a boat suddenly go faster than me without applying force to it? That's where the nonsense comes in. The first thing is the body dominates the boat. If we look at the weight distribution, 80% of it is the crew. The boat is only 18%, and the oars are 2%. I have lots of old rowing books, and a fellow whom you might know about, find out how to use your weight, and you will have solved the problem of how to move the boat.
Hey, Fairbairn.
Steve Bedburn,
Sorry, John, to
1905.
interrupt. Could I just ask people to mute unless they want to speak? Then we won't have any extraneous noise. Thanks, chaps. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. And the simplest way I can explain to you or demonstrate this to you is if I have two trolleys and I stand in one of them and my racing weight was 92 kilos and I put my sculling boat 15 kilos on the other trolley and have a string attached to the other trolley and I pull my boat towards me, it doesn't. Sorry, if I pull to go towards the boat, it doesn't happen. The boat comes to me. And that's what I'm talking about when we talk about the body dominates the boat. So on the recovery, when I pull myself up the slide, I don't go up the slide. I pull the boat to me. It's as simple as that. Everyone happy with that? The other thing is, the body is not a machine. So many of the graphs that you might come across aren't pure. They depend on the technique and the application of the individual. So this is my rowing chart. And what I'm trying to say here, in a very simplified manner, is if I change anything on this chart, I've got to change other aspects of it. If I've got to change my equipment, I've got to look at my rigging and then I've got to fix that rigging based around the rower. And the new rigging will give me a different distance per stroke. Distance per stroke will be affected by the rating I set up in the race. So everything is interdependent. Change one thing and you've got to look at everything else on the chart. So what I'm going to look at mainly is the British rowing technique and how the impact of rating and distance per stroke has on the British rowing technique. Now if we come to my sweet zone, remember this chart? And you're going to see a lot of it today. The leg drive is from the catch to the finish. But we don't start accelerating the boat until that point there. And what I'm saying is between that point of the catch, where the boat starts accelerating, and the finish of it is my sweet zone. And I'll be doing calculations later on to show you what that sweet zone looks like. Anything done before that is negative, stops the boat. Okay? From there to there, we are stopping the boat. And we can't stop it, it's a fact of rowing. Partly it's the fact that the oar is not fully covered in the water, and we've started to accelerate our body off the stretcher. And as we accelerate the body off the stretcher, we push the boat backwards. Now, the oar is a class 2 lever. It is not a class 1 lever. The fulcrum is not about the pin. So when we look to measure gearing, it is the overall length of the oar over the outboard. And that gives it about 1.44. So if we apply 100 newtons at the handle, we get 144 perpendicular at the pin. Everyone fairly happy with that? Now the problem is, in applying 100 newtons at the handle, we apply 100 newtons on the stretcher. So we end up with a positive 44 newtons on the pin. And that's what a class 2 lever looks like in operation. Round here, you get different slippage from sculling to sweep rowing, and I'll go into that at some later date. Basically, it's the length of outboard that drives it. Here's an example of it on the water. And we're going to watch 4 in the boat close to us, and they're going to come a red line when he places his blade in the water. I love slow motion. Right, 4's coming forward to take the catch, and that red line is where he enters, and the yellow line is where he leaves. So what we've got is we've got slippage during the drive. What makes a boat go forward is the sum of the forces at the gate, parallel to the boat. It's not the blade at the end that makes the boat go forward. It's that force there which makes the boat go forward. So if we look at the first bit, FST is the force on the stretcher, which is exactly the same as the force on the handle. What gives us benefit is 1.44. Sculling, so we end up with 2 times 1.44, the cosine of the times the cosine of the oar angle minus the stretcher force. Because Newton's third law tells us every force has an equal and opposite force. Everyone happy with that?
Sorry, can you spell out to me why it's because of the angle, John?
I'm about to show you.
Okay. Thanks.
First of all, if we're doing a clean, okay, the floor sees body weight and the weight of the weights. If we just look at the force on the handle, it only sees the weights. So what I'm explaining previously, that force on the floor is the force on the stretcher. And the handle only sees the force I put on the handle. But the boat sees both. So look at resolution, Bill. When the oar is at 90 degrees to the boat, the perpendicular force from the handle is equal F handle times 1.44 gearing. So the F at the gate is F perp times cos theta. And cos theta, that is 1. Okay? But what happens is we change the angle of the blade and cos theta changes. And that force parallel to the boat reduces. And it reduces to a point that is equal to the force on the stretcher. And when you go even further, the stretcher dominates and overcomes the force on the gate. So the sum of the forces in the gate become negative. Everyone happy with that? So it happens at the catch and it happens at the finish.
What is the angle relative to the right angle, roughly halfway point?
I'll come to you with that one.
Okay. It looks like the overall angle is something like a right angle, 90 degrees.
This is where it started with me. This is my piece of paper where I did my calculations. And I wanted to work out FA being equal to FD, horizontal force. And what happened is, it's equal when sine theta squared is equal to the inverse of the gearing. So if I then take a little chart and I move through the angles, I find that the angle we're looking at, sine theta, is about 56 degrees. So anything beyond 56 degrees, I'm negative. Everything be above 56 degrees, I'm positive. So the sweet zone is from that point where the handle force is equal to the stretcher force. Before that, it's negative. On here, it is positive. And this is my sweet zone. And we're talking roughly about 56 degrees, not from the boat, but from the perpendicular to the boat. So if you try to be clever by being longer, all you're doing is stopping the boat. And if you try to do it at the finish, all you're doing is stopping the boat. So what I've done is done a little chart there, and the sweet zone is in the sum of the forces of the gate, and that's about 56 degrees to about 126. So anything here is negative, and anything there is negative. So lying back extra, all you're doing is stopping the boat. Okay? But I'll come to it. The important thing for us is we want to get in the water and locked before the sweet zone, because we want to make full use of this sweet zone. And there it's there. At that point, we start, when the acceleration goes beyond zero, the velocity starts going up. And that is negative. That stops the boat. So, if we look at stretcher force, we're talking about 560 newtons. And this is in a scull. The handle force is only 320. And you say, well, how the hell does that boat make the boat go forward? So it's double that. We get 640. We add in the gearing and we get 921. But we've got to pull the stretcher force off it. So we end up with 360 newtons pushing the boat forward at the 90-degree point. The blade force out on the paddle itself is only 140 newtons. And that's not making the boat go forward, that's just being our fulcrum. So, oar angles. For sweep, we try to achieve a catch angle from parallel to the boat of 55 degrees and a finish angle of 40. But you notice with sculling, we can achieve 74. That's because our arms are out here. We can achieve 74 degrees. I believe this is one of the reasons why a double is faster than a pair, because we can get into the sweet zone in a better manner. So the total is 114 and 95 for a sweep. So that's what it looks like in a sculling boat. That's the sort of angle I'm looking for at the catch. And the first thing I look at in any sculling boat is the sculler's hands going outside the boat. Because if they're not achieving the catch angle. But that's what 74 degrees looks like, taken from Marlow Bridge. What I'm going to show you here is an Irish boat on the far side rowing against Henley. Now, the lad in the Irish boat at stroke is an Olympic champion. So, they're no fools. And what we're looking for, that's the 40 degrees, Leander. Now look at the angle they get at the catch. Hands away out the boat. And we're going to look at the Irish crew now. And if you follow bow, he's not in the water then, which is nowhere near the 74 degrees. They're burying too much. They're not using their butt. There's a whole number of things wrong. Three's waving to his mother. And they're rowing in. Now watch this angle.
Yeah.
There. You can see it's not 74 degrees.
Yeah, they're not in time, are they, John? And
Oh, they're not
number
anything.
number 3 isn't squaring properly. He's not. He's actually washing out.
Yep. And the burying that the gates are too low. They're looming. But if we're going to go across now to have a look at Leander, and let's look at the catch angle from Leander.
Yeah. 3 is consistently over squaring.
Yep. Now look at this angle. 374 degrees. Okay. Now, the other thing that the Irish weren't doing was placing. They weren't getting the blades in properly. And placing is about there. How we get the blades in during that first part of the drive. I'll just jump this one. So if we row in, as the Irish were doing, we shorten the drive phase. We end up in the sweet zone. And it extends the negative force on the gate. We are driving off the stretcher for longer. Forcing the catch deepens the deceleration. Nice book. And this fellow saw it back in 1963. There's all the end of the recovery. Okay? He's not until there. He's not until there. And he's not until there. So, all of that, he's driving off the stretcher and stopping the boat. This lad, Page, he said, this is the way to do it. And look how little that particular technique is losing at the catch. You're losing all of that in each of them, whereas with us, and what we coach now shortens that even further, placing the blade in the water, getting a butt. He's still rowing in a little. They're rowing in a lot. Coming from here and going down. And what I want now is that, placing it, and we get backsplash. But he saw that in 1963. And it's this bit here. Now, this particular fella is skying at the catch and then coming down. Whereas it should come from here and hit the water about there. There's a sweet zone. 1925. Bourne spotted it. Bourne spotted people driving off the stretcher before they're locked in the water and recognized that must be stopping the boat. So what we're looking at here is the different components. And what we do with the British rowing technique, we use the legs first. And as the legs begin to slow down, we bring the upper body in. And as that begins to slow down, we bring the arms in. So we're trying to keep the handle accelerating. As the boat is accelerating, we want to accelerate the arms. Two different graphs from two different people. What you notice on the first lad, his velocity that he loses before the sweet zone is that. Where with this fella, that's how much he's losing. Okay? He's driving the boat down, and then he's got to pick it back up again and accelerate it. Whereas this fella is losing a lot less of the catch because he's getting his blade in the water. Also, if this fella kept going through his stroke, he'd have probably ended up about that point. But he began to ease off near the finish. He began to go, and slow down. So instead of accelerating the whole way through, he was easing off towards the finish. So if we look at the recovery, this is beautiful rock over. It's moved position, but don't worry. Look at the posture. Look at the straight back. Look at the pelvis rocking over. Look at hold the posture there. A beautiful back. Rowing's a peculiar sport. We apply our force at right angles to the body, which means all the stress goes up and down the spine. So we've got to have a very strong core to be able to withstand that.
Actually, John, that demonstrates quite nicely the timing of the catch. That it's sort of first thing going in, not last thing going out. That
And
you need to take the catch just before you get to wherever you're aiming for on the row machine. I mean, she's only doing half
what we
slide.
talk about is the wheels should still be moving forward as we take the catch. Lovely straight arms, beautiful straight back. Now watch her raise her hands there. That's her placing the blade. Just at that point there. So even on the erg, we're concentrating on our technique. Why is it not coming out of this? Just to explain, this is our dear pal Kleshnev, who got it seriously wrong. In wiring up the individual to measure things, he put a rod in the boat with a little accelerometer and he attached it to the body. And he said on the recovery, oh, the body is going back towards the stern. As an engineer, I would say to you, no, all that tells me is that the body and the accelerator are coming apart. It doesn't tell me which direction is coming apart in. He then did all his calculations based on the fact that the body was coming forward. And you'll find in his book, well, in my area, it's totally wrong. So all I'm demonstrating here is the amount of force that we need to apply on the recovery. And if we look at momentum and the change in momentum, we end up that we only need to apply 118 newtons to cause that delta V. Whereas if you go back to the drive, we're up at between 6 and 900 newtons on the drive. So the recovery is inexpensive. It is cheap. Now, the other thing is he also took readings from the stretcher. And you'll notice the stretcher went negative here. And it's a transfer of momentum at the end of the stroke. So you finish the stroke, your body has been going faster than the boat. Your legs then lock and you pull the boat up to your speed. And that's what happens there. The next thing is you rock over. And in rocking over, you pull on your stretcher. So the acceleration begins here. Then, to others, you would say, oh, I pull myself up the boat. You have a negative force on the stretcher. So he's recorded all these things, but doesn't understand it. Professor Cosmati, if we look at the stretcher force on the top, what we see is on the drive, we head up here, but on the recovery is very little. But if you look at the velocity, on the drive, the velocity of the boat goes down first, then accelerates, and then on the recovery, with this very little force, accelerates the boat faster. So that's that hump on the recovery I showed you in the first graph. So with very little force, we're making the boat go faster than it was on the drive. Inexpensive. Doesn't take a lot out of us. Whereas that takes that's heading up towards 500 newtons. That's down less than 100 newtons on the recovery. Remember the 114 that I showed in the previous slide? That's the 114 there. There, 118 I calculated on the recovery to get that increase in velocity. And Klaus Mate, he's shown about, I don't know, that's about 130. Very close to my calculated number. So that's the clever bit. The recovery is inexpensive, the drive, because in the drive, you not only accelerate the boat, you accelerate your body. And on the recovery, all you do is pull the boat towards you. Everyone okay with that? Forget about that. So, being a silly engineer, I thought, how can I do calculations easily on this recovery? So I said to myself, if we were only pulling hard enough to keep the boat at constant velocity, okay? So we come off at the end speed of the drive And then all I do is pull enough to keep the boat going at a constant velocity. And all I need to do is to overcome the friction of the hull and the water. I don't need to do anything else. That's all I do. As I pull that boat under me, all I've got to do is overcome friction on the hull. So if I take the 8, and I know water friction is kV squared, K being a constant for the boat, and for an 8 is 10, and the drive time is about 0.67 seconds, and the drive max is 6.28 meters per second. So that's what we come off of the drive. The rower's mass is 8 times 90, 720 kilograms. The slide length is half a meter. So the friction force is factor 10 times 6.28 squared, which is 394 newtons. So that's what I need to overcome to make the boat carry on at a constant velocity under me. I have got to apply 394 negatively at the stretcher. Everyone okay with that? So what I've said here is 394 mass times acceleration, which is 720, which is the rower mass from here. So to find A, we get 0.54 meters per second squared. So the rower is slowing down at 0.54 meters per second. We are transferring the momentum of the rower into the boat. So as we pull on the stretcher, I am slowing my body down. We're happy with that. So the body is going along. I'm pulling in the stretcher. As I pull in the stretcher, I will slow my body down. And I'm slowing it down by 0.54 meters per second. I then put in for the distance, transfer it for time, and I get 1.36 seconds. So that is the time that it takes me to pull the end of the slide up to my body. So I add that to the drive time of 0.67, and that gives me 2.03 seconds length of stroke. I divide that into strokes per minute, and I get 29 strokes per minute. So you say, what the hell does that tell me? It tells me if I pull slower than that number, my boat will slow down because the friction will be greater than the force that I pulled on the stretcher. If I pull harder on the stretcher, reducing the recovery time, it'll take the rating up and the boat will go faster. So there's a point for a boat where the constant velocity for this calculation is 29 strokes per minute. So I do all the big boys. Why did my double go over the Henley course at 33? Because it was accelerating the boat on the recovery, which was cheap. If I take a single, K is different. K is 2.8. I end up with 40 newtons for the friction on the boat hull. I end up slowing the sculler down by 0.44 meters per second squared. So I end up with 22 meters per second. So if I row slower than 22 meters per second, the boat slows down on the recovery. I had Naomi, our Olympic gold medalist, doing the Thames, and she rowed 148 miles virtually non-stop. And she did the whole course beyond 22 strokes per minute. And people said to me, John, you're mad. Why didn't you do 18 and let the boat slow down between each stroke? Because quite simply, she'd have to have picked the boat up and accelerated it all the way back up again. So by keeping 22 strokes a minute, she kept the recovery roundabout constant velocity, so she didn't need to pick anything up. So she rode for the whole Thames 148 miles at 22 and above strokes per minute. I worked for a while with the people at Great Britain Rowing, and this is the Great Double with Helen in it. And this is a curve of them at 17.7 strokes per minute. And what's happening is the velocity is going down because in the recovery, they are not pulling hard. Nothing wrong. If you're going to do 17.7, your boat will slow down on the recovery. And this is just to show that the boat doesn't pick up and accelerate under you. If you don't apply sufficient force on the recovery, negative to the stretcher, the boat will slow down. 2 4s, exactly the same thing. One's at the left is at 19 strokes a minute, and the one on the right is at 22 strokes a minute. In each case, the boat slows down. It doesn't pick up and accelerate under you. If you're not applying sufficient negative force to the stretcher, the boat will slow down. Everyone happy with that? Out of another book, 17 strokes a minute, and the acceleration trundles along at 0. Not my graph, taken from another one of my books. To demonstrate it, here's Naomi on sliders. And what you'll notice is she stays virtually on the same position and she pulls head up to it. And that's because her body is heavier than the erg, so the erg comes to her. There is a little movement towards the head, and I can calculate that out. Okay, so that's showing exactly what happens in the boat. She is not going up the slide on the recovery. The slide is coming to her, and it comes to her because she's pulling with her ankles. And if you watch her feet come up, that's because she's pulling with her ankles. There, she's pulling with her ankles. She's rowing with her feet out, which is nonsense. There, pulling with her heels. And the music rubbish. Everyone happy with that? The demonstration of what's happening in the boat. In the erg, if you don't row fast enough in the recovery, you'll end up going up the slide and banging off the end. Why does this stop like that? So, haven't we all heard 2-to-1 ratio? You know, I was out with a coach whose name shall remain nameless, and my ladies were hitting 38. And I said to him, "What do you think of them?" And he said, "Oh, it's great, but they've got no ratio." I said, "What do you mean by ratio?" "Time in the recovery to time in the drive. It should be 2-to-1. I said, "Well, just a minute. If they're doing 30 strokes a minute and it's a second on the drive, what time in the recovery is that? 1 second? That's 1-to-1. Yeah. So, pal, this doesn't happen. So I decided to try and work out, where the hell did it come from? Where did 2-to-1 come from? I went back in time, back to Bourne, 1925. These are clinker eights, hitting 35 strokes a minute and 33. Why? That's why. The slides were 12 inches long, so the drive time was half a second, and half a second at 35 strokes a minute is 2-to-1. That's where 2-to-1 came from. And the idiots still talk about it. So what did I do? I went back to my formula. 11.16 is the friction factor for a clinker boat. Then stuck the mass in, friction force 220 Newton, drove that all the way through, and lo and behold, to get a constant velocity, 34 strokes per minute. Out of Bourne's book, time taken for a cycle, 1.7 seconds. Time taken stroke at the drive, 0.5. Time for the run, 1.2. What is that? 2-to-1. That has lasted since 1920. And they still keep repeating it again and again and again. You know, they learn it at their mother's breast. They never ask the question, why? They never ask the question, how does it happen at 35 stroke? If you watch any international, they seldom come off 35 a minute. There's no way they can do 2-to-1. But that's where 2-to-1 came from. Took me a long time to find that. Now, another Dr. Ernst Herdeberger. And what he was saying, at 20 strokes a minute, look at the top graph, at 20 strokes a minute, the boat just goes along almost constant velocity. We take the rating up. I was taught to take the rating up by driving harder in the drive. If I'm doing 32 and I'm sweating like a pig, putting as much work as I can in, there is no way I can work harder. So what they do is they shorten the recovery. They pull harder on the recovery. And what happens? The recovery time shortens and the velocity increases. Because I'm pulling harder on the stretcher on the recovery. Then if I want 40 strokes a minute, hey, my drive time will reduce because the boat is going faster. we take the rating up by shortening the recovery, not by driving harder, because you should be driving as hard as you can. So that's why it was so important for me to look at that constant velocity equation, because that led me to this. Happy with that, Richard?
Yeah, good.
This is what happens. The dark curve at the top is the recovery time. The grey one at the bottom is the drive time. And what happens is we pull the recovery down to almost match the drive time as we take the rating up. That is not my graph, but it demonstrates exactly what I've been talking about. So we take the strokes per minute up by pulling faster on the recovery. And it's cheap. Don't need to go into that. That goes through the ratios. Now, what I'll show you here is one of my ladies, and I'll show you how. Watch, she's paddling along light. Now watch her take the rating up. See the recovery? And watch the boat accelerate on the there, on the recovery. We're talking to a group of people. I'm a coach. Was that a good example of taking the rating up? You see how the boat accelerated under her as she pulled it. Everyone happy with that? She did not take the rating up by drive. That girl got to the final at 40 years old, got to the final women's Henley in a double. That girl won Henley Masters. Her partner won Masters at the Sculler's Head and was the fourth fastest sculler overall woman. And they all took the rating up. They rode the Pear's Head at 35. Now,
Sorry, John.
to interrupt.
Sorry, John. Could you just tell me what was the rating on that? Because I think you sped it up a bit, so I couldn't.
No, I didn't speed it up.
Sorry?
I didn't speed the film up.
Oh.
No, she was heading up to 38.
So did she increase her rating?
Aye.
Would you mind showing it again? And can you give us any idea of what the range of the ratings is?
She's going from, that's about 18.
Okay.
Now watch the boat, here, watch the boat accelerate under, see it? There. She's hitting 35.
Wow.
What you're hearing is the outboard accelerating. See backsplash.
We're not allowed to talk about that.
So go again. There she goes. See the boat, accelerate. There. Don't worry, Jens. I won't be asking you to do that. No,
John, sorry, sorry to interrupt you in your flow. I've got to duck out. I've got a meeting to go to. Thank you ever so much. This is absolutely bloody brilliant. And I'll look forward to seeing the rest of the video
okay.
that's being recorded. And I'll see you hopefully on Tuesday.
Great. Thanks for being with me. I hope I didn't upset your brain too much.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Andy. See you.
All right, see you soon. Thank you.
Can I just ask about the backsplash? Now you've mentioned it, I can't resist it. Is that part of the technique? Because I can think of
Absolutely.
another rower on the river who regularly backsplashes, but also rows very well and very strong and very fast.
The reason, if there is no backsplash, it means I'm going in at the speed of the water. And what you'll see is a forward splash, like that. And what I'm looking for is that. And I will, as like going into a slot, I will get a little backsplash. People say to me, oh, it stops the boat, John. It's a handful of water. My weight is 90 kilos. And I'm backsplashing a handful of water. What impact has that on my body? So what it does do, remember we go back to that book I showed you with the fellow getting into the water in short time as against coming rowing in. She does not drive off the stretcher without her blade in the water. Okay? If I don't have backsplash, I'm driving 90 kilos off my stretcher without it being locked in the water. So that is stopping the boat. Make reasonable sense? Hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the interesting thing is the distance per stroke, the graph on the left-hand side, goes down as the boat speed goes up. And I've been always told, no, setting up a chain, I should never allow the chain to shorten. Totally contrary to what I was told. But if we look at it here, and if we look at 22 strokes a minute, we're getting a distance of 10.25 meters. So in 1 minute, we're traveling 231 meters. So we have a speed, divide 231 by 60, 3.85 meters per second. If I now increase that to 38 strokes a minute, my distance drops to 8 meters, but I'm doing 38 strokes. So I end up, I've got 304 meters per minute. And I'm traveling at 5 meters per second. So as the rating goes up, the distance per stroke goes down, but you put more strokes in. Right. One of my pet hates. Feet out. Let's go all the way back. What have I said? Negative force on the stretcher. Colossally important. How would they take the rating up? Negative force on the stretcher. And there are people there who say we should row with our feet out. Simple erg. Good old A level. So it's independent of mass. So I took this little formula and I said, let's do 35 strokes a minute. Time per stroke is 1.71 seconds. Drive time's 0.85. So we'll get recovery of 0.86. The average velocity is distance over time, 0.5 or 0.86, 0.58 meters per second. Slap it into sine theta. And if I'm not pulling on the stretcher, the angle would have to be 7.7 degrees. It is 1.2. So 38 strokes a minute, the bloody angle's got to be 11 degrees. So I then said, let's take it the opposite. Let's put 1.2, which is the actual slope in, and do the calculation. And what it says is, I cannot go faster than 19 strokes a minute without pulling on my feet. And that doesn't take into account any restrictions caused by the muscles being stretched in the leg. That's just nice and simple. So to hit 38, you would have to be on 11 degrees. So then what I did was I took a seat, my stopwatch, measured the time to drive, total stroke, divided through, and I ended up with 19 strokes a minute. Okay, so the previous slide was theoretical. This one was practical. This one was measuring a slide going back down, a seat going back down the slide with a 1.2 degree slope. So, and anyway, I want you to be accelerating into the finish because I want transfer of momentum from the body into the boat. The faster my body's going at the end of the drive, the more momentum I apply to the boat. God bless the myths. Right, decelerating, approaching the catch. That. Okay, why do we decelerate approaching the catch? Because some people say, oh, you're slamming into the catch. Remember, we're pulling the boat towards us. We're not going up the slide and slamming in to the catch. But remember earlier, I talked about transfer of momentum from the body into the boat. The opposite happens on the recovery. We're actually taking momentum out of the body. We're actually slowing the body down. And the body becomes one with the boat, and the boat slows down to the speed the body's doing. So from my 22 strokes per minute graph, I said we were slowing down by 0.44 meters per second, our body was. So we ended up slowing 0.66. So the final velocity of the boat is 3.8 minus the speed of the body, because the body is now going to bring the boat to its speed. So what happened here is the body was going faster than the boat. We then pulled the boat towards us, and as we pulled the boat towards us, we were slowing the body down. And then the boat and the body became one, so the boat came to our speed because the body dominates the boat. So we end up slowing the boat down to here. We cannot get away from it. It will happen. We're not slamming in to front stops. We're building the front stops to us. And then as our legs slow down in their contraction, the boat comes to our speed. And our speed is slower than it was when we come off the drive, because we've transferred that speed into the boat. So we get a dip at the end of the recovery. Okay? There's a boat accelerating, and there's a body pulling the boat down to its speed. Now, people go on about centre of mass of body and boat. Don't make any difference, because quite simply, there are two things happening. There's a drive time when we have an oar in the water and we accelerate the boat using the oar, and on the recovery, we accelerate the boat using the feet. Two totally different approach. So drive phase is all about leverage of the oar and depending on the angle of the oar. Recovery is about pulling on the stretcher. Sweet zones is about making sure we are in time to use the sweet zone. We don't miss it. We've got to think about transfer of momentum, especially in a drive, because it is an advantage. Someone said to me, oh, if you've got your feet in and you really accelerate, you'll either go off the end of the erg or you'll pull the erg towards you. And my answer is yes, please, because if you're pulling the erg towards you, you'll be pulling the boat, making it go faster. The importance of rockover, because the rockover is the commencement of the acceleration on the recovery. It is a kinetic chain that we repeat again and again. So all of what I've done to you gives us these outcomes. We've got to think about taking the rating up by pulling the recovery, remembering that it's the sum of the forces on the pin, taking into the angle, that it's a kinetic chain, the importance of having a smart rock over off the backstops, equal and opposite forces will begin the acceleration, that we transfer momentum on the drive, and the sweet zone, we want to be in the water before the sweet zone so we can make full use of it. The gearing is not the inboard to the outboard. The inboard to the outboard would be 2.14, which you'd be putting twice the force on the handle, which is nonsense. It doesn't work like that. It is a class 2 lever. Right. Before I go on to that, doing that analysis, anything from the calculations or the background anyone has any issues with? No?
Absolutely not. Clear.
Fairly clear?
Yeah, good.
Shakes the brain a little bit?
Yeah.
Right. Fellow called Purser and the United States of America published this graph. And it was a graph they had taken during a camp. And I thought, okay, let's put my theories to work here. And what I said was, from the catch position here to the finish, 0.8, you'll have recognized 0.87 of a second. And the recovery time was 1.23, 29 strokes a minute. Excuse me a second, my throat's gone a wee bit. It's one of the measures, and I measured my sculler at the weekend, and I can tell if the gearing is too hard. If you cannot get to 0.87 and lower, your gearing's too hard. You need to reduce the outboard. It's ideal under 1 second. Right, so that's the first part. Just a minute while Richard heads the bog. There's another part in my muscle analysis where there is an optimum point at which we get max power out of a muscle. There's a fellow called Gill, and all I can assume is he did nasty things with animals' muscles. And if you look at it, what it's really saying to us, oh, he's a gem. What Gill was saying to us, there's an ideal velocity of the muscle that gives us max power. And that's why cyclists, when they're going along the road of a cadence, and then when they come to the hill, they don't go slower and go up the hill, they change gear and do the same cadence because they're staying on the hill maximum power. The man called Gill. And it's when I begin to understand why is it most internationals row it between 35 and 36 because of having the body on max power. And this is why this velocity on the drive is so important. If we're up at 1 second, we're going too slow. We're off the max power curve. And I reckon somewhere around about 0.7 to 0.8 is the ideal time. So I look at my scullers or my sweep people, time the drive time, and if it's too long, I ease the gearing to allow the velocity on the drive. Another story, another day. So I then look to the point where the minimum velocity come in. Okay? So the beginning of the catch to the beginning of the drive, she lost 1.3 meters per second. Okay? She was either making too big a catch or too slow into the sweet zone. Then after coming out of the water, the boat was slowing down for half a second. What was happening? She was sitting at backstops doing nothing. and the boat was slowing down, and she'd lost half a second of the recovery, and she dropped that amount of velocity. So she had only 0.73 of a second to finish the recovery because she was sitting at backstops doing nothing. So she had to hammer and pull the boat towards us. In pulling the boat towards us, she gave a peaky part which drove the recovery down. So she now lost that amount. So she lost 1.3 meters per second of the catch, and she lost a big chunk at the finish. And this is how I would start to analyze a graph to tell me what was going on. If she rocked over and started the recovery here, this wouldn't be so peaky. This would be softer and should take less momentum out of her body. Therefore, she would cause less of a dip. So this is the classic way I would analyze someone's velocity curve using what I've learned. Okay.
Okay, John, we're just coming up to our hour and a half now.
Good.
Thanks very much for that. Could we possibly move from here, unless there are any other questions, to thinking ahead to Tuesday, and what of the things you've told us today you would like us to be concentrating on, and how are you hoping to go about it?
Okay. Crucial to all of this technique is posture. What I want to do is to share with you how to sit tall and how to rock over. Okay? And I'll quietly develop a little, but we'll spend a lot of time just maybe making quarter slide, learning to maintain that posture. You saw it in both my girls. That beautiful, tall, straight back. I'll stop the punishment of your back. I'll stop the pain at L4 and 5 in your spine, because I'll begin to work on that posture and holding that posture. We're not talking about any strength whatsoever. Okay, so that's, and I'll talk a little bit about, depending on the time I've got, core body exercises, simple, gentle working body improvement exercises that will help you with your posture.
Okay, that's great. And anything in terms of moving forward over the period of the whole winter for our training, in terms of what we should be doing about building stamina, or does that need to go to another session?
That'll got to go to another session.
Yeah.
I want to get you with your technique.
Yeah.
I looked at the videos and it's 5 different people rowing a boat. And what I want to have is 5 people rowing a boat together and really enjoying. Now, I'm going to have to change your mind. I'm going to, your brain is fixed in a way to have you row the way you are. And it's going to take me time to change that.
Brilliant.
Because you'll be looking at me and saying, I don't know what the hell he's going on about, because I'm doing what he's telling me. But you won't do. You're doing what your brain tells you. And I've got to change that. And they say it takes 10,000 repetitions to embed something in the brain.
Yeah.
We lay down superhighways, laying down myelin along the nerves to give you these what we used to call muscle memory.
Absolutely.
But trust me, Bill,
Oh, I do. I've been through your hands before, if I can use that expression. So you
trust
can remember
me.
back a few years.
Just
That's
remember, in the gym, there is no God. There's only
questions from anybody, please. A very quiet class, aren't they?
yeah,
Should I stop the recording now, John?
yeah.
I'll look forward to Tuesday.
I look forward to it. Dan, was there anything then there that made you think?
Yes.
You know,
I think